Welcome to the third part of this three-part tutorial series where we turn this scene into a cinematic masterpiece in Unreal Engine. In the last part, we covered set design, adding imperfections, dynamism, understanding cameras, camera angles, animation, high-quality render settings, and essential pro tips. If you haven't watched that video, I highly recommend checking that out first. Link is in the description. In this part, we'll work on basics of DaVinci Resolve, color correction, film emulation effects like halation, blur, glow, film grain, etc. These techniques will help us remove that overly sharp 3D render look and introduce real-world camera imperfections. For those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. My name is Jai Parekh from IndiArt Visual Studios. We specialize in creating high-quality cinematics, virtual environments, game assets, and interactive VR art quiz. With that being said, let's jump right in and start creating. I am assuming you have some experience with Premiere Pro or Final Cut and you are new to the DaVinci Resolve. So first, I'll cover the basics of the software before diving to color correction. If you are familiar with DaVinci, feel free to jump to the color correction part. Once the software is open up, it will look something like this. You can create new project with this new project button, give it a name and click create. Once your project is open up, you can see below we have multiple different pages like media page, edit page, color page. These three pages are most important ones and we'll go through them one by one. If you go into media page, there is this section called media storage. In here you can find all your projects directories like your drives and etc. You can locate your renders from here. Okay, so here are all my different shots and its render sequences. If I go into first shot, this is our render sequence. If you hover over like this, it will play back and you can have a preview here. If you don't see your sequence like this and you have something like individual images, you can click on these three dots, go into frame display mode and sequence. Then it will convert into sequence. Below that you have this media pool. This one is your project library. So you need to import all your renders into this media pool, right? So you can simply just drag and drop it in here. Let's go into next shot. Okay, so now all our renders are in the media pool section. You can see different details like your FPS resolution in this area. This is metadata. If you don't see any of this type of properties, you can click here to collapse or open up the properties. After media page, we can move on to the edit page. In the edit page, we have this media pool section on the left side. We have the timeline section where we can edit our footage, and we have two viewports. One viewport is for the preview and another is for the timeline. So if you hover over this and hit spacebar, you can preview your renders in this viewport, and you need to drag and drop your renders in this timeline like this. It will create a timeline on its own. Let's import second shot. If you want to adjust the UI, you can hover over like this and there is this adjustment icon. Once your renders are in the timeline, you can press play to play your sequence, play again to pause it. You can also press L to play forward, K to pause, and J to play backwards. If you press L 2 times, it will play faster. Again, and you can pause it by pressing K. Other than this, if you want to edit your footage, there are different tools in here. First one is the selection tool. To select your clips, move upwards, downwards like this. If you want to cut the render, you can click on this blade tool. Shortcut is B. So if you press B and you select your frame. By the way, if you want to zoom in and out, you can press on Alter and scroll up and down to zoom in and out. If you want to move from left to right, you can press Ctrl and scroll wheel to go left and right. Right. If you want to increase the height of this footage, you can press Shift and scroll up and down to increase this height. So we were in the blade tool. If you press B and move your cursor here, there is our blade tool. And if you want a fine control, you can press your keyboard left and right button to move backward and forward, right? So maybe I'll cut my frame from here. So if you left click like this, there is one cut. And then to select, go into the selection tool by pressing A, click on the footage. And to delete this, there is a cool feature in the DaVinci Resolve. If you press delete, it will do a ripple delete. Let me undo it by Ctrl Z and move out. If we select it and press delete, it will snap all the following clips to the left side, right? And if you don't want to do it, then select the clip and press backspace. So it will leave the space and you can manually adjust the clip like this. There is also a snapping tool in here. You see this one, by pressing N, you can turn on and off the snapping. So if you press N, then your footage, your this timeline cursor will also not snap. And also if you delete something and if you try to adjust it, it will not snap. You have to do it manually. Sometimes it is useful, but I recommend turning it on. So these are the main editing tools inside of the edit page. If you have previous experience in the Premiere Pro or Final Cut, you can easily edit your footages with this tool. We have different properties as well. If you select any of this clip and click on inspector, then this window open up. You can zoom in and out. You can change the position. There is a opacity controls in here. These are all the settings that you would find in the Premiere Pro as well. Now let's move on to the color page. This is the default UI. You can adjust it like this. This is our main viewport. These are all our clips. If you can see these clips, it might be turned off like this. If you click here, it will open up. So you can select your clip and move to the different shots and do your color correction. In the right side, we have our node tree where we can add different nodes in here and do our color adjustments. In the below section, we have all the properties to adjust our color like lift, gamma, gain, our curves. In here, we have our keyframes, and also we can see our graphs from here. And you click on this full screen mode, then it will collapse into this floating window. You might see a single graph like this. You can have side by side graphs or you can have four graphs. I usually like to keep it like this, four graphs. You can change the graph from here. So suppose in the first section you want the waveform, so you can do it like this. You can have parade in here. If you have smaller monitor, you can have these two graphs in here as well and leave your parade in here and vector scope in this section. We have different sections here. So suppose if you turn off this timeline section, then you can disable this timeline part. You have this node section. If you turn it off, it will collapse like this. You have all your effects in here. So I am in my favorites, but if I go into show all, so you have different effects like box blur and all those things. We'll go through some of the effects in our film emulation effects as well. Then another thing is that this light box, this is very important when you do your all color correction and if you want to have a bird eye view on all your shots, so you can go into this light box. And finally, let's go through the project setting ones to see what are the project settings. So if you click on here, it will open up the project setting. So we can see our resolution is 1920 by 1080 HD, right? You can have different resolution like 4K, etc. from here. Then we have our FPS, which is set to 24 FPS. In the color management, make sure you have the color space set to the DaVinci YRGB and your timeline resolution and output resolution is set to Rec 709. Rec 709 is used as an output source for various platforms like YouTube, social media, and even broadcasting. So we'll stick to Rec 709. Now let's understand concept of color correction. For that, I will add a grayscale image. Open your effects tab from here, go to generators and add this grayscale image in here. It will look something like this. Now if you go to color page, we won't be able to change colors or do any adjustment because we need to convert this into a compound clip first. Then it will show up in here and we can do the color adjustment. In here we have different wheels. These are our primary wheels. So in our primary wheels we have gain, gamma and lift. Gain controls the brightest part of the image. So if you increase this, it will increase the brightest part of the image. Gamma controls the mid range of the image, and lift controls the darkest part of the image. So if you increase or decrease, it will behave like this. In here we have parade. The scopes read from the left to the right side of our image. So here we have, in the left side we have darkest part, so it is at 0, and in the right side, far most right, we have the brightest part, right? If we again look at our gain, so if you increase this will behave in a linear fashion, right? So there won't be any curve or breakage of the image. So if you increase all the way, you see it is almost a straight line. Same way, if you increase the gamma, it will create a gentle curve and give a nice fall off and increase our mid range of the image. Same way, if you increase or decrease your lift, it will decrease the shadow area and lift the dark part of the image. And this is our offset. Offset increases the overall brightness of the image, like this. It will increase the highlights as well, and it will increase the shadows as well. So if you want to increase the overall brightness or increase the overall exposure of the image, we can use the offset. After that, we have our contrast. If we increase the contrast from here, it will create a nice gentle S curve. You can see it in here. If we go into our waveform, you see we have our nice S curves. Let me exaggerate it to see the effect, like this. And then with contrast, we have pivot. If you increase the value of the pivot, it will create a more contrast value in the shadow area, like you see it in here. And it will decrease the highlight. And whenever you double click on the name of any of these properties, it will reset. And if you decrease this value, it will decrease the shadow area of the contrast and increase the highlights. So again, if you increase the contrast with the default value, it will increase from the center of the graph. If you increase the pivot, it will increase the darker area in the contrast, and if you decrease it, it will increase the highlight area of the image. After contrast, we have highlight. If you decrease this, it will create a gentle curve in here. Rather than in our gain, it will be straight like this, but with the highlight, it will create a gentle curve. And this is very useful when we have our lights or something and it is blown out. We can use this highlight feature. Same way in the shadow, we can increase this and it will create a gentle curve in the shadow section of this part. After this, we have temperature and tint. If I increase the temperature, it will move the image to the warmer area, right? We have a little bit of display in here as well. It is warmer side and this one is the cool side. If you double click it, reset it and move right, it will be cooler. And with temperature, we have tint as well. So tint will shift your colors into more green area or magenta area, right? So if you cool down your image and then you use your tint, it will change the cool color into like this. So we have somewhat like cyan color in here. If we reset it and move it to the left, it will change to the magenta color. Then we have saturation tab. Let me go to the vector scope from here. In the vector scope, we have 6 segments. This one is red, magenta, blue, cyan, green and yellow. So right now our image is little bit of magenta and blue side, so it is showing up like this. If we remove the tint, it will move to the blue side. And this line shows the saturation level of our image. If we increase the saturation, you see it's increased. Let's rotate the temperature as well. So now it's more on the right side. After this, we have curve section. In here we have different custom curves like U versus U versus saturation, etc. This first curve, this is used to create a contrast and increase the highlights and shadow area like this. So you see we are increasing our highlights, and if we go like this, the highlights will decrease. Same with the shadow. From here we can create a S curve, custom S curve as well, like this. Then we have hue versus hue. So if I move our temperature to this side and if we select the sky blue color, so it will create a point, main point sky blue color, and it will create an end point. Then if you increase the hue rotation, it will shift the sky blue color to cyan. Let's reset it, move it downwards, and this changes to the magenta. Same way with hue versus saturation, you can select your hue color and increase its saturation as well, like this. You see our saturation level is increased. Then we have hue versus luminance. This will increase our hue's brightness. If we select sky blue color and increase the luminance, it will increase the brightness of that particular color. Now let's move on to the log wheels. If we go here and click here, it will jump us to the log wheels. This gives us fine controls over our highlights and shadows. If we increase highlight in here, it is bending from the midpoint. It's not going straight like our gain. And if we increase the range here, it will affect only the highest part of our highlights. If we increase it more, so now it is only affecting the top part of our highlights. So this is very useful when we want to decrease the highlights of our lights or something. Same way with the shadow. If we increase the shadow area, so you see it is giving us gentle curve from our midpoint section like this. If we increase all the way, it will become straight and stops here. If we decrease the range, it will affect only the bottom part of our shadows. So you see it is reducing. So this is also useful when we want to adjust our black points and move it up or down. Same way with the midpoint. If we increase this, it affects the mid range of the image. After the log wheel, we can move on to the HDR wheels as well. This is more of a advanced stuff, but in the HDR wheels, the global wheel is most important, because in this global wheel, if we increase or decrease the exposure, this works exactly same as if we are increasing the exposure in the real world cameras. And if we change the color temperature or color tint, this works exactly like we are changing the tint in our camera as well. So this in the HDR wheel, this global offset is much more powerful. Now let's understand the node structure in the DaVinci Resolve. If you right click on the node, go to add nodes. These are all the different nodes available in the DaVinci Resolve. So we have a serial node, parallel node, outside node, etc. So for example, in our first node, we will balance our shot. I'll give you a high level overview. If we go into HDR palette and do something like this, so you see we reduce the yellow overcast from our image. This is our first node. In the second node, maybe we want to decrease the saturation. So we can add a serial node by right clicking on this, go to add node and add serial. Or you can click on the node and press Alt S, so it creates a serial node. Then let's go into primary wheels and reduce the saturation, something like this. If you want to see the effects of this node, you can press Ctrl D to disable or enable the node. Or if you want to disable all the nodes in your node tree, then you can press Alt D, so it will disable all the nodes. Other than this, if you select the node and right click and go to node label, you can name the node as well. Next, let's look at the parallel node. Same way, you can right click on this and go to add node, or you can select the node and press Alt P. It will create a parallel node. So parallel node helps to blend the effects of both of these nodes. So suppose if you want to select any particular hue and change its value, let's go into hue versus hue, select our blue color, sky blue color, let's move it to more towards the cyan color, right? You see our blue color changes to the cyan, and maybe we want to change this green color to the cyan as well. So let's select the green. So you see in here our green part, we have some portion in the green part, but now it is in the cyan part in here. So we change the green color and we change the sky blue color into more towards the cyan. With the parallel node, in this node we have all the other colors as it is. So it blends both of these nodes and give us the result. And let's look at the outside node. Outside node is used to create a vignette effect. So if you select this and press Alt O, it will create this type of outside node, right? You see this link as well. Go to the first node and let's go into this windows. These are different windows which is useful to create mask or something. So let's create a circle node. Let's give it a nice vignette effect, something like this, and let's increase the softness. If you can't see this overlay, you can press Shift H. So any changes we make in this node, it will be affected only to the inside of this node, and we can invert that with this button as well. So if we press this, so now any changes we do will be affected to the outside only. So let's go into our graph and maybe let's decrease the mid contrast value, something like this. Go into this node and let's increase this. Now if we select both this node and disable and enable it, so you see it creates a vignette effect. So let's start with color correction of our scene. Before we start, let me open up my scope, change it to scope side by side, and I will open up waveform and vector scope in here. Then click on here, select qualifier, and click on here and select display qualifier focus. With this setting, whenever you hover over any of your scene color, it will show up the color calibration in your scopes. So right now we can see we have so much of yellow and orange cast all over our scene. So first we need to do white balance of our scene. For that, we will go to our HDR palette and we'll use the global offset, because this global offset in the HDR palette works exactly like as if we are adjusting the exposure or color tint in our real camera. So to do the white balance, there are main two concepts. In theory, we need to shift our this color palette into the center of our image, right? Because this is our white point. So most of our image should be in this area. But in practical, we should respect our scene and we should respect how our scene is lit. So our scene is lit with mainly this type of orange interior lights, right? So we'll respect that as well. So let me show how in theory it should work. So you see in our scope our colors are shifting. So in theory it should be something like this. If you hover over this wall, this is our pure white wall. So you see in our waveform our color focus is completely merged together and it shows a white. So this is our white balance in theory, but in practical we want some orange cast. So let me decrease this to something like this. So you see now we have somewhat of a orange cast in here as well. If we press Ctrl D and enable and disable the node, you can see a big difference in our image. After this, let's move on to adjusting our highlights and shadow area, right? So I'll press Alt S to add serial node and I'll label this as well. So in the second node, I'll jump to my primary wheels and in my log wheels, and you see our highlights are clipping in here. So we'll use our highlight wheel and let's reduce it a little, something like this. So you see our highlights are now down, but we are also affecting this portion of our highlights. We only want to affect this part. So we'll increase our high range. So you see now we are affecting only the top part of our highlights. Now let's lift little bit of our shadow area because it is crushing right now. And same way we are affecting all this mid shadow area as well, so we'll decrease our lower range. After this, let's adjust our overall exposure and maybe give it some of the contrast. So for that, first I'll go to my primary wheels and reduce my gain and increase my gamma, and will increase the contrast as well a little. We want to affect more of our shadow area, so we'll change the pivot and move it left side. And lastly, I want to reduce a saturation as well, just a touch, because in reality we don't have this much of saturated image. After this, I noticed that we have somewhat of red overcast in here, and our teal color is not completely in this cyan part. Also we have this wall color and this chair color more towards the green part rather than the cyan. So we can adjust it with our parallel node. I pressed Alt S and then Alt P. We want to reduce this red overcast to more towards the orange. So we'll go to hue versus hue, select the red and reduce it. So it will shift from red to orange. So earlier it is going towards this red and now it's shifting towards this orange part, right? Then we want to select our blue, sky blue, because right now our cyan color is more towards this blue, right? And let's shift it. So you see our this color, it shift from blue towards the cyan, and we want to select our green and let's shift it. So if we move like this, we have exaggerated effect, but let's decrease it a little, right, to something like this. So you see earlier this our green color is going in here, but now it is shifted towards the cyan. And lastly, let's add a vignette effect. I'll press Alt O to add an outside node. Let's select this and go into our windows, select this circle. By default, Unreal adds a vignette effect, but it's more of a generic vignette. With this windows, we can add custom shapes. Maybe we can do something like this, or we have vertical focus area, then we can do something like this as well. But for this shot, I'll do something like this. Tilt it. Let's increase the softness radius to fullest and let's invert this. If you press Shift H, so any change we make in this node will affect this outside area only. Go into our curves and reduce it a little. Go into our outside node, increase this from the highlight parts, and let's select both of this and enable and disable the node. It decreases the brightness in the corners and increases the brightness in the middle part. So you can adjust this according to your taste. We have shifted our image quite a lot. If we disable it, we first adjusted our color because it has so much of a orange overcast. Then we notice that we have clipping of our highlights and shadow. So with our log wheels, we reduce our highlights and increase the shadow and adjusted the range as well. Then we adjusted our exposure and reduced our gain a little, increase the gamma and increase the contrast, and also decrease the saturation, right? Then we reduce somewhat of our red overcast, change it towards more towards orange, and we fixed our cyan color as well. And lastly, we added the vignette effect. Now let's move on to the film emulation effects. For that, I'll add a serial node, open the effects tab, and first we'll add the blur effect. Drag and drop this Gaussian blur and reduce it, so it will reduce the overly sharp edges and smooth it out. Then we'll add halation effect. Search for halation, drag and drop it in here, and click on this view isolated ranges to see what are the areas that are affected in with this halation. If you increase it, it only affect the brightest part. So let's do something like this. Let's increase the strength for now to see what are we affecting. So you see it creates a nice subtle halation border area around our highlight part. In the global adjustment, if we click on this view glow alpha, right now it is rounded, but we can change this aspect ratio to 2 to have an anamorphic effect. And let's untick this, and we can blend this as well. So maybe we can do 0.75 in here, and in the strength we can reduce it just a little. Remember, with this effects we want to do only subtle variations, right? Then we can add a glow to our image. Let's reduce the threshold for now, and the aspect ratio, we want the anamorphic aspect ratio, so let's increase it to 1. So you see we have now this type of stripes in here. And then let's reduce the blend, and let's increase our shine threshold. So right now it is affecting the overall image, but we want only the brightest part to be affected. Maybe 0.5 is better. And lastly, we'll add a film grain effect. Type in film grain, drag and drop it in here, and for this we'll select 16 mm archival. There are different presets in here, you can select whichever you want. Let's zoom in and enable and disable this. So you see it adds this type of nice characteristics of a film camera. If you play it right now, we have some of noise in here. You see this flickering, we can fix it in the DaVinci Resolve. This is because of our Unreal Engine renders. So let's add a, if you press Shift S, it will create a prior node. And let's get rid of those noise, change this frames to 5, change this to better, then increase this luma and chroma mix, and then unchain this and increase the chroma. Do keep in mind that this will reduce your PC performance, so use this with caution. And let's disable this grain as well. So you see our noise is gone now. If you disable this and play it back, we have noise, but now we don't have it. So this is a very nice technique in the DaVinci Resolve. Unfortunately, it is only available in the studio version, it's not available in the free version. So now let's enable our grain and let's see the effect. You see it adds very nice film grain effect in here. If this film grain is too much and you want a cleaner image, you can change this to 35 mm as well, right? So it will give subtle, and you can also blend this, change the opacity and make your custom grain effect. I'll change to 16 mm archival, and now select all this and enable and disable this. So you see it is reducing that overly sharp 3D render look and giving us more of imperfection with the blur, with glow, with halation, and also with the grain. Now let's apply this grade to all our other clips. So select all the other clips, go to the first clip and press the middle mouse button. So it will apply the same grade to all all our images. You can click on this icon, split screen, change it to selected clips and select these two clips. So you can have a side by side view and you can check the exposure and all the other things. So maybe in here our gamma is little bit higher. So let's go to our primary adjustment and reduce it a little. Whichever part is highlighted, you are in that clips color correction node. So if this is highlighted, you are in the first clip. Let's go to the third clip and select this. Let's select these two clips, and maybe this is also a little bit brighter. So let's reduce the gamma just a touch. And this is working. Click on here again. So, and let's play it back once. Okay, our color correction looks good, but I think we should change the vignette shape in these two shots, right? So let's go in here. Let's apply vertical vignette, and also let's animate this vignette, because in here we are shifting focus from this foreground element to this background element. Let's go to the keyframe and let's see, this is our 8th node. So open up your character 8, keyframe your circle window, go forward, and till here we have focus on this. So let's do this. So now our keyframe is created, and from here we are shifting towards the background image. So let's go here, and now we'll do the horizontal shape, something like this. Let's see how it is working. Maybe for this shot we need to increase the softness radius. And also let's go in this section in here, and let's reduce this gain. This works as a opacity, so let's do 0.5 and see the effect. Okay, now it is more subtle and believable. If you press this, it will play in loop. Okay, it is working nicely. Let's do same thing in here as well. Let's do 0.5. Same thing, go into character 8, highlight this. We want the focus in here till this frame, and then it needs to shift to here with the vertical shape, right? Something like this. Okay, nice. So our grade is applied to all the images, and we have correct vignette effect in all our scene as well. Now let's move on to the rendering page. For that, tap on this deliver page. In here you have different preset like this. Select one of the preset, and we'll first create a render setting for 4K renders and then the HD renders. So for 4K you can select QuickTime or MP4. In the codec, make sure it is set to H.264. Other than this, in the resolution, select the 4K resolution. Make sure the frame rate is set to your project setting, which is 24. Then go to restrict and change this from 10,000 to 80,000 for 4K. Then go to advanced setting and make sure this two settings is ticked. Then select your output location in here, give it a name, select save, and click on this add to render queue. Click on add and click on this render all. If you want to save this preset for future purpose, select three dots, select this save as new preset and give it a name, right? Then if you click on here, you will get all your preset. Let's change this preset to the HD. For that, just change this to HD resolution, and this 80,000 change this to 40,000. Create a preset as well. So now you can swap between 4K and HD renders, and you can have your renders in both of those resolutions. And that's a wrap for this series. I hope you found it helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you don't miss out when the future video comes. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.